TNCRadio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.live, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.live, where we offer the entertainment, sports, weather, traffic, and news that commercial drivers want to hear. Speaking of entertainment, Las Vegas is known for that. It's famous for a lot of things, including phrases like "what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." It has a colorful past with founders of the casino industry that include Bugsy, Siegel, Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, Moe Dalitz, Mr. Las Vegas, Jay Sarno, Anthony Spilatro, and even Howard Hughes had a hand in the growth of Vegas. Today we have Bill Friedman with us. He's the author of numerous books about the real history and untold stories of the people who started Las Vegas. His book, 30 Illegal Years to the Strip, is very compelling. And he's going to surprise you with facts you didn't know about the mob bosses who actually started Sin City. Bill has spent his career in the casino business. He taught the pioneer course in casino management for UNLV's College of Hotel Administration. He turned two longtime losing casinos on the Vegas Strip into top profit makers. He's consulted to casinos all over the world, and he's thoroughly researched the history of the Nevada gambling industry and interviewed the owners and top executives. Welcome, Bill. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. It's wonderful being here.
You have a fascinating story of your own. You actually knew a number of the men who started Las Vegas and even worked for some of them. If you wouldn't mind, tell us how you got started. I understand you kind of got an itch for the gambling industry when you were 12.
Yes, I grew up in Oakland, across from the San Francisco, and my parents took me when I was 12 years old for a week to Lake Tahoe. Our neighbors had a cabin there, and I stayed in the cabin, and they had a small casino at the North Shore. And they took me there, and I was just completely fascinated with dealing. At that point, it wasn't the gambling. It was the dexterity of the dealers in handling the cards and dice. And as long as I stood a few feet back, they let me watch all afternoon, every afternoon. And I came home, and every boy I knew wanted to be either a cop or a fireman. And I wanted to be a Las Vegas casino dealer, which was a very tainted industry at that point because the whole country knew that there was a lot of organized crime behind it, but that's the business I wanted. And when I turned 21, I came to Nevada and started dealing for 3 years. And I was totally fascinated with the executives who worked behind me. Many of them had worked in illegal gambling across America. And they were the most independent, toughest guys I ever met, most of them with hearts of gold, second-grade educations. And after work every night, I try to get one to go out for a drink, and I just sit and listen to their stories, and I wanted to research them. And I went to the library and started reading old newspapers about how Nevada's casino industry came to be and realized I just didn't have the time on my days off. And the Vietnam War came along, and I was drafted. And I declared as a conscientious objector, and under the law, the FBI had to do a thorough investigation of my background to make sure I qualified for the designation. Well, at that point, J. Edgar Hoover was the FBI director. He told the Congress in America every year there was no such thing as the mafia. He wouldn't let the FBI investigate organized crime. And so when the FBI reported to the Selective Service Board, they said that they've never heard of anyone who never committed a felony and yet spent all their social time with criminals. And so they said, we're going to give you a choice because you may be able to figure out how organized crime works and learn its history. You can either do what we normally do and have you clean bedpans at a hospital near your home for 2 years, so that you don't benefit from this designation, or you can spend 2 years hanging out with hoodlums in Las Vegas and investigate their backgrounds full time. So I opted to hang out with hoodlums, and I have on my website the actual documents of my being drafted and ordered to work 2 years for the School of Criminology at the University of California, Berkeley. They designed the program that for 2 years I carried out, and I'm the only person that ever got an honorable discharge for hanging out with hoodlums. And I thought when I started it, I would know everything. I had no idea because they came from many different cities, many different backgrounds, and I spent the next 50 years putting together the entire story.
Were you a little scared going into this, knowing you're working for the federal government, that your life might be in danger?
I knew that if they knew that there was some ulterior motive, they would have not talked to me anymore. I only feared for my life one time. The Las Vegas Strip as we know it today, there was 4 hotels built in the 1940s, but
right.
L.A. had some incredible illegal casinos behind great nightclubs. And so the people in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, the businessmen and the Hollywood industry had no reason to come to Vegas. But in 1949 to 1951, a senator by the name of Kefauver did an investigation of illegal gambling, and the public, who as a whole supported the illegal casinos, were shocked at how much their law enforcement and judges and prosecutors were taking in bribes, and there was no federal law against them, but the country systematically at the local level closed down one gambling operation after another. And that's what got Vegas going, because all these people who loved casinos had nowhere to go. And so the gamblers went to Vegas, and you mentioned Meyer Lansky. He had strong ties to Cuba, and he got Havana opened up, and those became the 2 big gambling centers, and that's when it all started. And there was 3 enormous prohibition gangs. Everybody was local. All the gangs were local in nature, and they were all into moonshine, and they might be able to get some legitimate booze from various sources imported. But these 3 groups just imported phenomenal amounts. It's shocking how much they moved into the country every year. And these 3 groups were headed by men who would end up building the Las Vegas Strip because they'd been gamblers. The only crimes any of them committed in their life was illegal booze sales and illegal casinos afterwards. So during the 15 years of Prohibition, they totally dominated that world, and then they went into the casino business, and they had elegant, beautiful nightclubs across America. They were fronted by the finest restaurants, nightclubs, showrooms. Some of them required men to be in tuxedos to enter. Much more glamorous than the casinos of today in Las Vegas. And when they were made illegal in 1950, they headed out to Vegas. So from 1946, with the opening of the Flamingo by Ben Siegel, until 1966, Caesar's Palace, 80% of those strip hotels were owned by people associated with these three gangs.
Wow.
And that's
we're going to have to go to
taught
break
me
here,
business.
Bill. I apologize, and I definitely want to pick it up after we come back from break. We're talking to Bill Friedman here on TNCRadio.live. He's written the book, 30 Illegal Years to the Strip. He's got some great stories about the history of Las Vegas. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. Definitely stay tuned for more coming up.
This infoblog on TNCRadio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. ISS score for truck drivers explained and how to find it. An inspection selection system score is called ISS score, was created by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, to help law enforcement officers determine if the truck should be inspected. The inspection selection system score is frequently used to determine if your truck will receive a bypass command or not. There is often confusion between the ISS score and the CSA score. While there's a correlation between the two, they're not the same thing. The CSA score identifies high-risk motor carriers. The score is based on the performance data of the driver. The ISS score uses a combination of different CSA categories known as Behavior Analysis and Safety Improvement Category. That's basics for short, to determine the carrier's overall inspection rating from 0 to 100. Similar to the CSA score, the lower, the better. What determines your ISS inspection value? Unsafe driving, hours of service, HOS, driver fitness, controlled substances and alcohol, vehicle maintenance and cargo, hazardous material. There are 3 different ISS ratings categories: inspect, optional, or pass. Inspect, 75 to 100. Optional, 50 to 74. Pass, 1 to 49. ISS scores can determine how often you'll get inspected. Although some roadside inspections are at random times, most will be as a result of a higher ISS score. How to find ISS score. The FMCSA has an online portal where carriers can log in to check their ISS scores. You'll log in using your DOT-issued PIN. From there, you'll see the company information section on the main screen. Next, click the blue button labeled Inspection Selection System Info. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Want to advertise on TNCRadio.live? Take advantage of great discounts for 2021. Check out the sponsors page at TNCRadio.live or send email to info@tncradio.live.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Bill Friedman, who's the author of 30 Illegal Years to the Strip. He's quite the expert on Las Vegas, the people who started it, and he knew a number of the mob bosses personally. Bill, you were talking a little bit before we went to break about the history of Las Vegas. If you wouldn't mind, if you could tell us what some of these people were like, the people you knew, and what Vegas was like when you were there.
Well, to pick up where we were, 1950s when it took off, and the most powerful gangster to ever move to Las Vegas, and the man who really got the strip rolling, was a man by the name of Moe Dalitz, who came out of Cleveland, Ohio. He had the 3rd biggest prohibition gang, and where the other 2 big gangs were in Manhattan, where over half of the wealthy Americans lived, and they brought in the most expensive, finest liquors of the world by freighter and then speedboats. He brought everything in across Lake Erie from Canada. So it was perfectly legal until they put it on their speedboats in Canada to bring in, and he distributed it. He also, the other two gangs, the biggest ones, they only did fine liquor. He also was the biggest maker of moonshine in the history of America. And he had two different stills that the government raided, and he obviously was warned because the big storage tanks were there, and those weren't illegal, and everything else was gone, including the people, so they couldn't bring any charges. And the sizes of these things were absolutely phenomenal. So he was this huge operator. And after Prohibition, he had illegal casinos in several different cities and very high-end. He had one that had a 1,600-seat showroom way back in the 1930s, and all the top entertainers of that era appeared there. And so in 1950, when he was shut down by the Kefauver reform movement, he came to Vegas, and he was a very dear friend of Ben Siegel's. And Ben Siegel had opened in 1947, or well, actually Christmas of 46, and Siegel had a vision for the future of the Strip. And he was tied with all of the key people that would build it. And he had a dream, and he proselytized it, and he tried to get them to invest. And when he was killed in Beverly Hills, he was planning to build a golf course. Everything the Strip became was his dream. And Dalitz and all these other men who knew him so well, they copied his dream. Well, in 1950, Dalitz opened the Desert Inn, which was the first high-rolling casino on the Strip, because till then, high rollers had casinos available locally. Then in 1958, he opened the world's biggest hotel, the world's biggest casino. By today's standards, it may not sound big at 1,000 rooms, but at that time, not only was there nothing larger than 300 rooms on the Strip, but there was hardly a hotel in the world bigger than that. And when he opened it, remember this is before computers, top hotelmen told me they didn't know how he was going to check everyone in and out over the weekends. How do you handle 1,000 roomfuls of people? It was a major undertaking, and both were humongous successes and set the standard. So he was a man I absolutely wanted to interview, and everybody else I approached was very receptive. What I would learn is that the people that came out of Prohibition were the tightest-lipped people I've ever encountered. They never talked about themselves, and I had to, over time, just observe and listen, and I'd put the patterns together finally. And what I realized was they had shiploads coming in. They had huge convoys moving, huge railroad trains moving, and they had warehouses for all this stuff. And they didn't want anyone to know when they were going out to sea, when they were going to a warehouse, where it might be, and they never talked about themselves. And ironically, I never would have been able to open one of these people up if I approached them at any other time, but everything fell into place. If going back, when I studied the history, one of the many things I learned was most of the key figures in organized crime and in Prohibition and in building that Strip, they were all born around 1920. Because at about 20 years old, they joined Prohibition in 1920, and they started as young men and then went to the top. Well, when I started my research in 67, these men were all near or approaching 70. They were all wealthy. They were all trying to get out of the business. Howard Hughes came in, had the world's largest private corporation. He bought 6 of the places, and then Hilton led the corporations, which were finally allowed to be licensed, and these guys wanted to retire. And they'd always been attacked in the press as vicious, dangerous men, when virtually nobody that was involved in this group was in any way violent unless you threatened them, and then they could kill as fast as you can possibly imagine. But they themselves hated violence. So I never could have got them to talk, but they wanted to leave the truth for their families. And so I hit them when they were opening up. And I was in either the living room or the offices of 5 of these men when they told me things that made them really look bad. And I knew that there was nothing in any of the documents I had that could lead me there. And I told them the truth. I said, what you just told me makes you look very bad. I couldn't have found this out. If you tell me that you want this off the record, I'll never repeat it. And all 5 of them told me separately the same thing. Tell the truth, but tell the whole truth. And they all wanted their story told, all but Moe Dalitz. He didn't change. He didn't want to talk. Well, for a year, I literally stalked him. Everyone I talked to that I got close to, they all knew him. He was the top man in town. He was the only one that could bring them all together on issues and get them to agree to something. And everybody was close to him, but none of them could get him to talk to me. Well, one of them finally gave me his private number. He had at the top of the Stardust Tower, it was his suite, and they gave me his phone number. Well, I thought about it. I'm going to get one shot. He's either going to say yay or nay. Calling him during the week, he'll be in his office. Weekend, I don't want to wake him up, but I don't want him to have left, so I finally decide I'll call him at 10:15 on a Sunday morning, and hopefully he's up and hopefully isn't gone. So he answered the phone, and he was one hostile dude. He didn't like it at all, but he finally said, meet me at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning in my office here at the Stardust. And I said, okay. And then he said to me, real nasty, he said, now can I get back to the football game? And so I came into his office at 8 a.m. the next morning, and the lobby to the office was very long and narrow. You entered at one end. There was a secretary sitting with her desk at the other. There were 3 men sitting along one wall looking at the other wall, and another man at a desk looking down. And I'd never seen a photo of Dalitz, so I didn't know what he looked like. But the man kept eyeing me, and finally he came up, and he let loose on me. And Ben Siegel has been in everything practically has been fiction. No one did any research, ever talked to anybody who knew these people. And Ben Siegel had a temper. All temper is very uncomfortable to be around, but he was not unusual beside he'd flare real fast, always with reason, and then he'd cool down fast. But I cannot believe there isn't anyone listening that hasn't seen much worse than Ben Siegel. But Moe Dalitz, the likes I've never seen. It started deep inside. It roared up. He never repeated himself. He never swore. He never stuttered. He just attacked me like a bull. He told me, if you keep up your research, you're going to put me in prison. He said, you have to stop your research. You have to leave town. This is the end of it. And this isn't a head trip I was on. Everything in me, every feeling in me was, you open your mouth, you're dead. And so finally he said, you go back to your apartment and I'm going to send someone over there and work this out with you. Well, I went back to my apartment, and I had gone to graduate school at University of Nevada, Reno, and I had a good friend there. We palled together, and he'd gotten a job in Vegas and hadn't gotten an apartment yet, so he was sleeping on my couch. And I get back, and I tell him, I said, I can't make sense out of this. I've never heard, forget today, because today in the pandemic, people are working at home. Nobody worked at home then.
Sure.
Nobody did business in their apartment. Not only, why would he send them to my apartment? Whoever it was there at the hotel. Why didn't he have me meet? Why is he sending them to my apartment? I said to my friend, I said, I can't get anywhere with this but the fact this guy's coming to kill me. And as I talked to him, I hadn't noticed, but in the 2 minutes I was talking to him, I said, what are you doing? And he was completely packed. He said, I think you're right. I'm leaving. And he walked out the door. So I sat there, and nothing made sense, but someone was coming. So I just sat there. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't turn on the radio. And I sat on my couch. I stared at the other wall thinking I'm going to get a knock, open my door, and it's all over. And I sat there and I only heard one sound in my head, and that was Peggy Lee singing, Is This All There Is? And over and over I heard her version of that. I sat there from 8:30 that morning until 11 p.m., decided he's not coming, went out to eat just to get away and be with people, and figured I won't get to him, the biggest guy, the most important, but that's life. And Monday I went back to my normal routine. On Thursday, I got a call from his administrative assistant, who had been the former police chief of Las Vegas, and he said, I want to meet with you. And he said, I want to set up a meeting with Moe. So I had a lunch with Moe for 2 hours and had a very good interview. Had the next lunch with him, and he acted stranger than I've ever seen. He started trembling, and he was shaking more and more as the 2 hours went on, but we were having a good conversation. It wasn't about bad stuff. And at the end, he finally said to me, I can't talk anymore. I can't do this. He said, I am going to tell all of my people they're free to talk to you. If there's any bad consequences, they won't be held for it. They can say whatever they want to you, but I can never talk to you again. And he said, I have one man who knows everything about me, and you want to especially talk to him, and that was his convention salesman. His name was Mark Swain. So I went back and started arranging interviews through the administrative assistant, and I got with this man. Now, what confused me was, here you have Moe, who never talked to anybody about himself. How does another man know everything? Well, the other guy became a very close friend. Everybody cooperated, helped me. And after a few years went by and they knew I was completely legit and part of the gambling world there, Mark sat down with me and he says, let me tell you what's been going on here. You
And
thought,
on that, could we, we're going to have to go to break. I would like to pick it up right after the break on, let me tell you what's going on here. This is fascinating how you were able to gain their trust and get some information that no one else ever has. This is awesome. We're talking with Bill Friedman. He's the author of 30 Illegal Years to the Strip on the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. Definitely stay tuned for more. There's some great stories coming up.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. The dark side of the long-haul trucker lifestyle. A trucker's lifestyle can be a gloomy place at times. The long days, stressful work environments, and loneliness have major effects on a driver's life. The dark side of the long-haul trucker's lifestyle is often overlooked and not addressed. As a result, many drivers suffer from mental and physical health problems. Before entering the trucking industry, long-haul truck drivers need to be aware of the good and bad that comes with this lifestyle. It's difficult to stay healthy. Being in good health is a rare thing for long-haul truck drivers. Life on the road doesn't give drivers many opportunities to live a healthy lifestyle. When you spend the majority of your trucking career on the go, your food options are limited. Although taking an exit to get McDonald's may seem like an easy solution or the easiest option, eating fast food for every meal for weeks at a time can cause serious health issues. Obesity is one of the most common health issues in truckers. If you don't watch your diet and exercise, you could end up developing a serious health problem. Say goodbye to a regular sleep schedule. The trucking industry runs 24/7, 365, so having a regular sleep schedule is rare for long-haul drivers. The loading and unloading times are often never the same. At times, a driver will deliver a load at 2 a.m. one day and 1 p.m. the next day. In addition to the inconsistent load times, drivers can make multiple deliveries a day. This creates a lot of stress on the body and leaves the driver operating on a few hours of sleep. If you're struggling with getting enough sleep and staying awake on the road, check out our blog, 5 Easy Steps to Help Truckers Stay Awake While Driving. You'll feel lonely. It's not uncommon for long-haul truck drivers to feel lonely while on the road. Drivers have very little face-to-face interactions while working on the road. While this may seem like a good thing for some drivers, it can start to develop depressive symptoms. Depression is a common side effect of trucking. To help avoid feeling depressed on the road, talk to your friends and family on the phone at least once a day. As a long-haul truck driver, you can often feel like you're missing out on your loved one's life. Communicating with them daily will help you feel less lonely. It's hard on your relationships. Long-haul trucking can strain your relationship with your significant other. Being away from your loved one for weeks at a time is never easy. In addition to being apart, many drivers struggle with balancing their work life and personal life. Relationships already take a lot of work, but long-distance relationships take even more work. When you become a long-haul truck driver, it's important to be willing to put an extra effort into your relationship. Some quick tips to having a healthy relationship as a long-haul truck driver. Communicate daily. Spend as much time together as possible when you're not working. Consider therapy. Avoid arguments. Trust each other. This blog has been brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. You're listening to TNCRadio.live. Remember to tune into the Truckers Network radio show with Shelley Johnson weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern.
This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly. We're talking with Bill Friedman, the author of 30 Illegal Years to the Strip. Super fascinating. Oh my gosh, Bill, you were super persistent in getting the real stories behind Las Vegas. Let's pick up where you left off before we went to break, when you got authorization from Moe Dalitz to finally talk to everybody.
and I finally sat down. I'd been dealing. We became close friends with his convention salesman, who was his close buddy, and he told me after a number of years, he said, you think that everybody here is like an uncle to you. Think about it. Every time you get an interview, when you're done with your questions, they're very curious, and they're asking you who you're talking to and what the subjects are, and they're like your uncle. He said, you thought I liked you. He said, I didn't. He said, I love Moe, and you were a threat to Moe, and that's the way I thought of you. He said, Moe told all of us, you talk to him, but you find out what he's doing the moment he learns what we don't want him to know. I want to know that instant that he becomes a threat to us. And so he gave me this background that the only reason anyone talked to me, because they were under orders to do it, they all kept track of me. And then he proceeded to tell me what Moe didn't want me to know, and I never could have put it together from the documents, but as he talked, there was many things that happened in the overworld that tied to what was going on there, but didn't lead to it. And I'm going, my God, this is the story I never could have put together. And when he got done, no threats, nothing like that. He just said, Bill, you now have the whole story, but this part you cannot write until Moe retires. And that was many years later. But no threat, no nothing, just you won't do that. And we remained the best of friends. I was executor for his estate, take care of his family.
Wow.
Had, these close ties, but that was something I knew I didn't talk about until Moe had retired. And of course, that will be in my next history. The one after the current one I'm writing, because it ends in 1950, and the book after that starts, and that's Moe's era, and that will be the whole story of Moe.
So tell us about some of these people. You said you talked to 5 of the people?
I talked to 5 who told me terrible things about themselves. And what I couldn't believe when I said, if you want me, now that it's out, if you want me to put it off the record, I will. And they said, no, it's fine. That's who I am. But tell the truth, the whole truth. These guys had reached a point in their life they wanted their families to know the truth. If you read the books that were written and the awful stuff, you would have thought Moe Dalitz was the most threatening, dangerous man. The 2 biggest gangsters that moved to Vegas were Moe Dalitz, who had the places I told you about on the Strip, and the other one was a man by the name of Benny Binion. And he had a single crap game in Dallas, and he had it in a hotel room. Doesn't sound like much, one little crap game, but all the oilmen played there.
You got to know him really well, too, right, Benny?
Oh, yes. Oh, he was like a father to me. I love this man. And so Benny, he was tried for 2 different murders. And if you read the stuff about him, before each trial, all the witnesses disappeared, which makes him sound like the most awful, dangerous person you ever heard of, till you find out the truth. And it took me a long time to find out the truth, because Benny wouldn't talk about those, and I knew I didn't know anyone from Dallas. Some of these people, I know their whole history, because I knew everyone that they worked with, where the city they were in. And in Dallas, it took me a long time to make inroads. So when I finally met people who knew what was going on, I said, I understand everyone disappeared before the trials. They said, oh, yeah, every witness disappeared. That's why he was found innocent. And I said, well, what happened? They said, well, a week before each trial, every witness and their whole family went on a world tour, first class, to all the major capitals of the world and great sites of the world, and they spent a month or more just traveling the world with their friends, all at the expense of Benny Binion. They disappeared to the prosecutors.
That's
totally
great.
Different version than you
Oh,
read.
yeah. Treat them to a major trip. They're not where they need to be. That's great. That's pretty clever when you think about it.
And Benny had this image, get my way, I'll kill you. That was the image he had. When I write about him, I used to have lunch with him every 6 weeks for years. And every day for lunch, he'd have 4 or 5 other very powerful men. Once in a while, a politician, all top business people, all movers and shakers. And I never opened my mouth. I was nobody. And I just sat there and listened. And you would, these are the kind of stories where the manipulation that goes on, the this and that. Everybody was talking about what they were doing. I had my paper with me in case a good story came up, never got one good thing. They just were talking about what was going on in the community. And then the next 2 hours, we talk about whatever I wanted to talk about, and then he'd go take a nap. And but he got into conflicts with people, and he had this image of total violence. What's going to be amazing when you read his story is the clever ways he manipulated people. He would read himself the contracts. He had a second-grade education, but one of the smartest men I ever met. And his reading of contracts, and he'd find an angle, and he would tell the person, now, you can do what you're doing. That's allowed, but this is what I'm going to do, and it's going to hurt you more. Do you really want me to do that? And he came up with one clever angle after another. These men were so different than anything I ever encountered, but violence was not something that any of them did. That's why I loved them. That's why I was comfortable with them, unless they were threatened. And at that point, yeah, these guys, and it was true of everybody. I was very close to the top gaming controllers, the early ones, the top 2 attorneys for the industry. Today, every company has their attorneys. Every property has their attorneys. Back then, 2 men were the attorneys to everybody. They described how every contract was written for me. And all of these people, they'd been in the military, and they'd faced tough situations. One attorney, he was the biggest mover and shaker in town by the name of Cliff Jones. One night, he was in bed with his wife, and the bedroom door was closed, and he heard a noise, and he grabbed a gun and opened the door, and a guy's coming down the hallway with a knife, and one shot, and the guy's dead. So it happened. In other words, the good guys then stood up, but none of them were threatening or pushed anyone around. And in Vegas, it was a cultural thing. All the different nationalities got along. I have never, ever in my life been anywhere where everybody knew and was aware of the differences and rejoiced in them. And this all goes back to Prohibition. Back when immigration started in this country, most of the people came because they were poor and having trouble surviving. And so they moved to the poorest neighborhoods, and their kids became gang members. And they lived with people that were their own nationality, their own culture, oftentimes their own language. Well, from 1840, when major immigration began, until 1890, a whole half century, and I read the immigrant reports for every single year. Every year, Germans were number 1 for a half century. Irish were number 2. Well, I was confused, even though there were many English-speaking countries, so there was more English, and I have German relatives married into the family. I didn't know that many German. So I had to figure out what happened to the Germans, because I never encountered in all my research a major Jewish or German gangster. And the reason is they settled in the Midwest and made milk and cheeses were a huge thing for them, and their bratwurst, and they made beer important. All the early big beer manufacturers were the Germans out of this era. Well, their kids didn't grow up in the inner cities. They weren't part of the gangs. They weren't involved, the adults, in politics much because they were working on their farms and ranches all the time. So it was the Irish that dominated, and they had terrible street gangs in that era, but then they moved on, and they were over half the police and half the politicians in major cities like New York and Boston, and they now controlled the immigrants. And then from 1890 to 1920, the number one group was Italians, and the number two group was Jews. And Brooklyn, which had been all Irish, switched over as they moved up, and it became a total Jewish Italian group. And that's what Prohibition was. If you look at most of the I'm talking about the top people, they were Jewish, and they were Italian, and then a smattering of everything else. If you look at the Las Vegas Strip, it was Jewish and Italian and a smattering of everything else. Now, the Irish were important downtown because, like Benny Binion, they weren't in Prohibition. They didn't have as much to invest, and they made the great downtown operations. But again, what I encountered was in Las Vegas till 1980, I never met an Italian who had a business with partners that there wasn't a Jew. I never met a Jew with a business with partners that didn't have an Italian. The three greatest downtown operators of that era, the El Cortez, the Horseshoe, and the Golden Nugget, they were Irish owners, and they were the operators. Their number two investor was a Jew. So the whole culture, everybody bonded together. Most of the time when I went to a hoodlum's home, it was me and him. His wife was there for a while, and then she'd say, I have to do something. I was a normal social couple until she'd leave, and we'd talk, and she'd never show again. If I needed something to drink, he went and got it. Sure. If it wasn't a Jewish home and there was going to be more people there, there was never a time an Italian didn't show up. If I was in an Italian home, there was never a time a Jew didn't show up, because although I was completely accepted and I'm Jewish, there was always one of the Jewish boys that was there. And that
it's interesting. Las Vegas was the first to maybe start true diversity, and everybody got along, and there was a definite moral code, which I've heard you describe before in a previous interview. I definitely want to discuss some more here, Bill Friedman. Oh my gosh, you've got some great stories. Everyone's listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. Bill is the author of 30 Illegal Years to the Strip. He has some fascinating stories. Definitely stay tuned. We'll be back with more from Bill coming up.
This blog on TNCRadio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Quick and healthy meals for truckers. Life on the road can make it challenging for truckers to find a healthy meal. Truckers are on the go and sometimes on a strict time frame to get their loads delivered on time. Stopping at a truck stop for fast food sounds like the most convenient option. Although it may be more convenient, eating unhealthy gas station food can take a toll on one's health. Plus, it can be more expensive. Stopping at a grocery store and picking up healthy foods can benefit truckers in many ways. Eating healthy improves mood, health, and well-being. Consider investing in appliances like a cooler, slow cooker, lunchbox, or a microwave. This will make eating healthy on the road much easier. Breakfast. The most important meal of the day, especially for truckers. Eating a good breakfast helps keep your energy up. Oatmeal is a quick and easy healthy breakfast. You can make it in under 3 minutes, and it's easy to store in your cabin. Tip: Adding some fresh fruits and nuts in your oatmeal can make it even more delicious. Yogurt makes a great breakfast. It's high in protein and can keep you full for a long time. Try adding some fruits, nuts, and honey. Toast and peanut butter. You'll need a toaster or a toaster oven for this one. Peanut butter contains high levels of protein, fiber, and healthy fats. It also gives you endless energy. Protein bars are the quickest breakfast option. It's safe to eat while driving. If you're in a hurry, protein bars will make a great breakfast. Lunch. It can be very tempting to pull over and stop at your favorite restaurant. Lunchtime's a great opportunity to make healthier choices. Some favorite healthy lunch meals are the bento box lunch with loads of healthy, clean foods. It's quick and easy, too. Burrito bowls are full of fresh veggies and just take 10 minutes to make. Ham sandwich, a classic, easy lunch. Chicken salad takes about 30 minutes to prepare, but it's well worth it. Serve it on lettuce or any type of bread you like. Dinner? This is where a slow cooker will definitely come in handy. Honey garlic chicken and veggies is the easiest one-pot recipe ever. Hardly takes any effort at all. Beef stew makes a great dinner. You can enjoy it all year round. Whole roasted chicken in your slow cooker's a recipe every trucker should try. It's delicious and can keep you fed for a couple of days. Ground beef and potatoes are amazing and will only take you about 15 minutes to prepare. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Enjoy the best in trucker-style music and comedy. Weeknights starting at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.live. This is the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with Bill Friedman, the author of 30 Illegal Years to the Strip. Bill, oh my gosh, you've got so many great stories, and this book, you've got a series of books. I'm sure that people really want to read what you have because you can't cover all of this in just an hour. Where do people find your information?
My information is at Bill Friedman, Friedman, author.com, and it has everything about the books in my background. 30 my books, but 30 Illegal Years, which is what we were talking about. The soft cover is at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and the digital version is at every seller. Every major seller carries the, I can't
is
think
it
of the word.
Kindle version?
Yeah, the computer version. And
Sure.
for some reason, the words just slipped my mind. But they all have it.
Awesome.
And,
so it's Bill Friedman, Friedman, author.com, correct?
Right. Yep.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Bill, you have some fabulous stories. And I, as a journalist myself, I really admire your tenacity. You definitely took on an obstacle there that a lot of people would maybe not dare to tread, you know. Bravo to you.
It has been an incredible adventure for me. Incredible. And I was exposed to so much, and good people, the hoods that did any crime that victimized anyone, I absolutely stayed away from. I probably am more disgusted by them than the general public. But the group that built Vegas, the only crimes they committed was prohibition, liquor, and gambling. Probably the worst thing they did, and I did it too as an operator, was offer free cigarettes.
Okay.
When I was doing it, I did not realize the danger that they were.
Sure. Bill, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. I definitely would like to have you back because you have just a ton of stories here, and we've just scratched the surface. You're listening to TNCRadio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. I'm Shelley Johnson.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. For more information regarding our podcast, reuse, copyrights, etc., please visit our website, www.tncradio.live.